Nope. Oh, hold on, we're making progress. All right, 2 seconds in and we're already making progress. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. If I can very politely ask you to take your seats. And as you're taking your seats, I just wanted to say a couple of things. My name is McElroy. I am the political correspondent for Cardinal and Pine. And for those of you who don't know, Cardinal and Pine is a North Carolina site that deals with politics and news. And our mission is to reach an audience that cares super much about ideas, but it just has a middle of their busy lives, and they don't always have enough time to pay attention to them. And so that is our audience, and it's in trying to reach that audience that I have over the last several months been covering the cuts and potential cuts from the Trump administration and how they affect a wide range of people. And in those conversations, in those rallies, and those protests, I've also spoken with lots of veterans. And so this idea came to me in response to those conversations over and over and over again from people of all ages who have served in several wars and who have all taken the same oath of service. And the thing that I learned in those conversations, many conversations, is the power of the individual story, even while talking about things that affect everyone. The power of an individual story, even when talking about things that stories that often get told in numbers, in 80,000 and millions of dollars, and lives cost and lost. And I have really been affected. I'm a journalist. We are journalists. But I've really been affected by these personal stories. One of the, spoiler alert, in the VA cuts panel, one of the questions I'm going to ask the panelists, so you guys prepare, giving you a heads up, is funding the VA a moral argument? Is the answer a moral answer? And so these questions is up on the thing. If you want to go and add your answers to that, that would be great. Before we get started, I have learned a lot of things I didn't know in these conversations with folks. And one of them was, as I was talking about pitching this as a veterans event, I had no idea that often military families feel pushed out of the conversation about veterans issues. They feel overlooked. They feel like a lot of the things that are happening to them are not being discussed. And so that's one thing that I want to try and solve for tonight. It is a veterans event. It is a Voices for Veterans event, but it is also a chance to talk about the effects on military families and all the things that these folks go to while their loved ones are putting their lives in danger. So, before we start, there's going to be a short video of some of the conversations that I've had, some of the conversations all the Cardinal team has had. So thank you very much. This is Cardinal and Pine's first live event. So any mistakes? Oh, there it is. Thank you. So any mistakes or false starts, blame my staff and not me. I'm just kidding. It's 100% on me. Thank you very much to Matthew and to others. Okay, so quick video.
Save the VA!
Without the VA, I 100% would have taken my own life. The VA healthcare, the VA's had some problems, of course, and I don't say it doesn't need improvement, but without the VA, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so by Elon Musk going in and indiscriminately cutting VA healthcare, veterans are going to die. Veterans are going to take their own lives who otherwise would have gotten care.
Veterans will be waiting even longer for appointments. The proposal is to have the staffing at the 2019 rate that we had. But we have seen so many veterans that become eligible for care in the VA system since 2019. The VA won't survive in 2025 with 2019 staffing.
This would mean that almost 20% of the VA workforce could be out of a job and tens of thousands more veterans would be unemployed. This is shameful.
And this is all stuff that we were promised when we enlisted and gave a blank check with our lives.
But because DOJ wasn't paying attention to what they were doing, okay, they were firing service-connected, disabled veterans from working on the crisis line. It is un-American. It's not what any of us believe. It's not even close to what veterans were promised. They don't deserve to be put in the middle of this BS.
So a lot. Is this on again? No. Can I have the mic? Well, there it is. Good. I just had to stand up. So a lot of the people that you just saw on that video are going to be in the panel now. So if my first panel, health cuts panel would like to come up, please join me in the 5 seats here. Ladies and gentlemen, your first panel for the night. You can sit wherever you would like. Excellent. And so I've already forgotten things. Is there noise coming? Does anyone else hear noise? Is that from a video feed, or is someone in the green room, one of my teammates talking? Okay, you're welcome, by the way. Okay, so I've already forgotten something. I wanted to thank Katie Sevick and Maria Donnelly for their conversations with me. They are the ones who told me about military families and why we need to include military families in this event. Without them, I would not have thought to do that. So thank you very much to them. Absolutely. Okay, so we are going to start with some easy questions. Mr. Martin, I didn't get a chance to say hi to you. So hi, it's nice to meet you. Welcome. Okay, so this one is a tough one. I'd like you to tell me your name and why we were super smart to invite you on this panel. So Anne-Marie, go ahead.
My name is Anne-Marie Patterson-Powell. I am a registered nurse at the Durham VA Medical Center. This is my 16th year with the VA. Why you invited me? Because I work with veterans every day. They're my family. So I know a lot about what's going on with them.
Excellent. I'm very glad you're here. Dr. Horton, what's your name? And why was I smart to invite you?
So my name is Dr. Kyle Horton. I'm an internal medicine physician, and I worked at the Richmond McGuire VA, and now I have both a 501c3 and a budding 501c4. It's On Your Side Health and On Your Side Action, respectively. And what I'm engaged in now is what I'm calling a medical patriot project, and it's engaging folks like yourselves on issues like veterans' toxic exposures and water contamination that's affecting defense communities. And so I do consulting with individual veterans, but now we're morphing more into the policy space to try and influence more issues on veterans' exposures and improving veterans' care from my experiences at VA.
Thank you very much. Scott, what do you got?
Hey everyone, I'm Scott Peoples. I am an Army veteran. I served right here in Fayetteville in the 82nd from 2009 to 2014. I live up in Raleigh now, but it's good to be home. So since leaving the military, I've been a veterans advocate in many different forms. First, I worked for a group called Hire Heroes USA, helping transitioning veterans find meaningful employment and helping with resumes and mock interviews. Then I worked with an organization called Vet the Vote, which helping military veterans recruit them as election poll workers. And I was an election poll worker myself for several years. And most recently, I am now on the board of an organization called Veterans for Responsible Leadership. And I'm the North Carolina state leader. In the next panel, you'll meet our fearless leader and president, is also here as well. But we're an organization that advocates for all veterans issues across the board and trying to get people in office that put country over party and principles over power. And I was lucky enough to be a veteran surrogate for the Kamala Harris campaign in the fall, traveling around the state, speaking on issues specifically towards the PACT Act. So you'll see me around the state, but it's really an honor to be here with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Ager. I'm a North Carolina House Rep from Buncombe County, but more importantly to this discussion, a 25-year Navy veteran and patient, I suppose, at the VA, but also, somebody who's trying to figure out the policy space and how do we make North Carolina a great place for veterans to be, but our great VA hospitals are a big part of that. So,
thank you.
I'm Grier Martin, and I'm not sure you were smart to invite me here, but I'll try to justify my presence. I'm an Army veteran, spent most of my active and reserve career here at Fort Bragg, and it's always good to be back at the home of the airborne. I served in the North Carolina House for 17 years after I got off of active duty and worked a whole lot on veterans issues there and also quality of life for our military families too. Left that job to go work in the Biden administration at the Department of Defense. Didn't work on veterans issues too much there, but did work on a lot of issues of interest to military families. Oversaw DODEA, DECA, strangely enough, also oversaw military compensation. Every time I would get my LES and I would see BAH on it, I always wondered how they set that. Well, it turns out the people that set that all of a sudden worked for me, so I got to go meet the woman who sets BAH, and you'll be reassured she's very, very smart. She takes her job very, very, very seriously. So when you get the surveys for your cost of living, be sure to fill it out because they do pay attention. Just a quick pitch for that. After I left that, I came to work in Governor Cooper's administration, his Secretary of the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. And now I am at least tentatively retired, but in my part-time, I'm chairing our state's Veterans Affairs Commission.
I think that the expertise that is on this panel are fantastic. And how it's going to work is I'm going to ask each of you kind of the start question, but I really want this to be an open conversation for everyone to join the conversation and feed off each other and respond to one another. So Anne-Marie, I'm going to start with the question that I already posed in the intro. Is funding the VA a moral argument or a moral question?
Funding the VA is a moral argument. We made a commitment to people because I don't think they're thinking about people when they're making these decisions. I think they're thinking about numbers. They're not looking at the human side of it. But we promised those who signed up and left their families, their homes, everything behind to serve a country who says, if you do this for me, we're going to take care of you when you come back. So we ought to do what we promise we say we're going to do. With no strings attached, with no arguments, with no pushback. We just need to do what we say that we're going to do.
Who else wants to answer? Dr. Horton, you've been dealing with a lot of these issues, dealing directly with folks on a wide range of all the stuff that it means to need the VA. So when you are dealing with a patient who is facing something that it comes in line with their service, does it feel like a moral argument?
It absolutely does feel like a moral argument, and I'll give you an example. So I had a patient that I was seeing in a clinic, as it was a special post-deployment clinic for OEF and OIF veterans that I was serving in, and like many veterans in that clinic, he was one of the, then we would find out later, 22 veterans we could have potentially lost to suicide a day at that time. And every single one of my patients knew someone in their immediate sphere that they had lost to suicide. And so when I saw him, I recognized that his physical pain was more an emotional pain and more of a moral pain and moral injury from what he had suffered. And that said, Fortunately, we didn't lose him because I recognized the signs and symptoms, and despite the delays, he was saved by his father, who he brought in to meet me in the clinic and to thank me, which is heartbreaking in and of itself, because I feel that moral obligation that you do to our veterans. And his dad was a Vietnam vet who had kidney cancer that was missed related to Agent Orange exposure. And so you see this generational trauma that happens that's costing veterans lives. And so, you know, I have entered into this policy sphere to try and advocate for veterans like this, but I became enmeshed in what was the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention for American Veterans Act. At that time is $22 million over 5 years at the federal level, with 22 veteran suicides a day. One U.S. senator blocked this legislation, Tom Coburn from Oklahoma. One senator, okay, that is possible. And in the CR, the Continuing Resolution Spending Bill, there was an additional $100 million allotted for the Capitol Dome refurbishment. So that's where Washington bureaucrats put their priorities. So to me, we have a sacred obligation to protect those who served, period. And those who wrote a blank check in service to this country with their lives do not deserve to be penny pinched by Washington bureaucrats. They don't deserve to be penny pinched by Captain Bone Spurs in the White House right now, and they don't deserve to be penny pinched by the likes of Doge and Musk, who don't even know what they're doing, period. They deserve to be, you know, cared for by folks like up here on this panel who actually served, and those who care about those who have served and who have family members who have served. My grandpa landed in Normandy D-Day +1. My dad was a Vietnam draftee, but he was fortunate to end up at the Pentagon. But those that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis are dealing with misdiagnoses, including cancers from their exposures. They're dealing with risk of mental health crisis. And the VA is the organization poised to best represent and deal with veteran-specific care needs, and it's being gutted by those who quite clearly have no idea what they're doing, and that is a moral violation. It's a violation of our obligation to those who have served this country.
And can I add to what she just said as well? Since we're talking about this, the push is to privatize the VA, and so all the screening that is done in the VA system by doctors who understand veterans and know veterans, those aren't done in the private sector. So the veteran doesn't get the same level of care in the private sector that they get in the VA.
And that's one of the things, because I know that we had talked about that with both of you, have talked about that in our previous conversations, and that is one of my cards, so I can't wait to get to that. But Scott, so, and the rest of the panelists, you're all veterans. So there is a huge overlap to me, to a lay person, between the oath of service that military members take and the Hippocratic oath to do no harm. This idea of what it means to take an oath, what it means to, it's not just a promise you make that you intend to break, but what it actually means to take an oath. So I want to hear from the three of you about that idea too. From a veteran's perspective, does it feel like a moral argument to take care of you all and your fellow service members?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is the first war where it's been an all-volunteer force, so you know, less than 1% of people in our country have volunteered to serve for the Iraq and Afghanistan war. So, you know, how we take care of them after service is kind of our #1 recruiting tool as well for future people who want to join the military. You know, for people that are watching and thinking about joining, are seeing, you know, our government decide to penny pinch and cut these jobs here, you know, not help with, you know, suicide prevention care. You know, people are gonna, you know, think twice about wanting to take that oath and join. And to your point about, you know, the overlap of oath of service and to the people at the VA and their Hippocratic oath, you know, that's one thing I definitely has kind of, you know, angered me about this whole situation is, you know, in my experiences, the people at the VA, you know, they could be working elsewhere and making more money, but they absolutely love taking care of the veterans, and they take their job, so seriously, and to see how they've been treated as numbers, just, oh, we fired 2,500 people. To your point, every single one of those people is a person that got in it for the right reasons, wants to serve their country by taking care of our veterans. And the way they've just so inhumanely, shrugged off, cutting people with no transparency, and just people receiving emails. People have already moved their families across country. It's just been pretty despicable to see how these patriots that work at the VA have been treated. And so to you all, thank you for, personally myself had this in 2023, an incident that was not related to my service at all. I had this, I go to the Durham VA it's my primary health care. My wife and I own a small business, and I go to the VA, and they're on the Affordable Care Act for our health care. And I had this really rare condition called Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, where I woke up one day and half my face was paralyzed, and I had extreme vertigo, and had to immediately be rushed to the emergency room and urgent care. And it's one of these situations where if you don't get it treated within 72 hours, the chances of your face being permanently paralyzed go way up. So lucky for me, I got just incredible care at the Durham VA, got the care I needed. I went to every eye doctor because I couldn't blink for 6 months, so I went to every eye doctor imaginable. I didn't know there was a specialty for people that have an eyelid specialist to help you close your eye, but these are the people that they treated me like family. Every time I went in, and I owe my face being back to normal to their care. So I just think, going back to the oath, we definitely share that. The VA is a community. I love going to the VA, to be honest with you, talking with the Vietnam veterans and the World War II veterans in the waiting room and hearing their stories. It's not like going to a private sector doctor. Everyone there is part of the same bond and part of the same family. So I definitely want to keep that strong.
And Representative Ager and Mr. Martin, you both are veterans, but in your remarks you also mentioned that you are in the policy space as well. You are tasked with helping to create the infrastructure that all these conversations take place in. So I want to ask you that moral argument story, but I also want to know, from your unique position, what are the things, like if these cuts come through, what do you know to be the day-to-day effects on veterans and military families? And not just the VA cuts, but all the federal cuts that affect military family members. And then what then is the response from North Carolina lawmakers to try and rise up and meet this thing?
Yeah, big question. But I would just say that, when a society decides to go to war or bring people on board to defend their country, when a government or a society decides to do that, they have a moral obligation to take care of those people over the long haul. And I think sometimes our short-term thinking in politics, we make a decision to go and fight a war in Afghanistan or fight a war in Iraq or Vietnam, and we need to understand as policymakers that means we have made a long-term obligation to the people who have done this work. And I think that's often forgotten, right? You talked about numbers and making people numbers, and I think that is the great thing that the VA does, is that it takes care of the whole veteran, right? It's about this community, it's about that space where people can come and, first of all, there's people that they can talk to and share their experiences with, but that also builds a community that encourages people to get the treatment that they need. It encourages people to actually ask the questions that they should be asking. And in our current data-driven world, that is pretty rare. And certainly, even in the healthcare space, we see people become numbers, and all of these procedures become numbers, and all of those things. But the great thing about the VA, and the reason in my mind that cuts to the VA are going to be, really detrimental, is that, when you go into the VA and you talk to the person at the desk, they have time to talk to you, When you see a provider, they have time to talk to you and to actually, it doesn't feel like you're just being rushed through. And I think, it's really important that we not forget that part of it, because it's hard to put a number on it. And so a lot of times in our sort of Doge data-driven world, we discount the importance of that human interaction. And then what can we do in North Carolina? I mean, obviously we're talking mostly about federal cuts here. I continue to think, and I'll let Grier talk more about that, because he was doing it for a lot longer than me, but I continue to think that there's a lot more that we can do at the state level to actually improve the lives of veterans. My experience in a term and a little bit more is that we kind of throw a lot of small little things out there saying how much we care about veterans, but I'm not sure we really get to the meat of how do we make veterans' lives better and help them thrive in our state in a way that we, the way that we should.
And Mr. Martin, same. I'm going to keep calling you Mr. Martin because I didn't get a chance. If I had met you, I'd be calling you Grier. Okay, so you two have been part of the policy space with this, but both on the federal level and at the state level. So what have you learned in those two kind of big gargantuan, where it takes forever to move the machinery, and where the policy papers don't have first names or often numbers that are to describe the things that we're talking about that in our lives are very real and very personal. So what have you learned over the years of trying to deal with this about how it can be so difficult to solve a problem that if you were to ask folks, people nonpartisan would say, of course we want to support veterans, of course we want to say to support military families, of course their oath is sacred, but yet here we are with the problems that have been lingering. So what have you learned in your many years of trying to address these things?
A great question. I think you're right that if you asked all 435 members of the U.S. House, 100 senators, and asked all 170 legislators at the state level, do you support veterans? I think all of them would say honestly, yes, we do. But when you are a policymaker, particularly an elected one, you have a series of competing priorities. I think everyone in the General Assembly and in Congress would say we also need good roads. They would say we need to pay our teachers a high salary. We need to pay our state employees a high salary. We need to have a properly functioning judicial system to keep prisoners behind bars, criminals behind bars. All those things cost money. All those good causes are competing for resources. And so what happens, what breaks through the bureaucracy are those issues that have support behind them. So all too often, unfortunately, the issues that have a lot of money behind them are the issues that prevail. Companies that make profit on a certain issue are going to use some of the profit they make to hire lobbyists who are going to argue that we should fund whatever that issue is. Veterans tend not to be as wealthy, and it's harder for us to get together and throw money behind our effort. And so it's not necessarily any ill will towards veterans. It's just that we don't have the political clout that it takes to get our issues advanced. The obvious next question is, how do we get that political clout? Well, the good news at the state level is folks like Eric, I mean, your district has, what, about 80, 90,000 people? I think if you're in his district and you email him or call him, you're going to get a response. He's going to pay attention to you. So you need to know who your state representative is, who your state senator is, and you need to know who your member of Congress of the U.S. House is and your U.S. senators, and you need to actively keep in touch with them. Now, at the federal level, a U.S. senator has a huge staff who's reading his or her email and responding to it. It's harder to have an effect there than it is at the state level, but it still matters. In the end, for whatever reason, elected officials like their jobs and want to keep it. I think Eric, at some late nights at the General Assembly, probably doesn't want to keep his job, but in general, they want to keep coming back for more. So use that. You are the key to them getting reelected. If you can have them understand that getting reelected depends on them enacting veterans-friendly policy, then we'll start to see some results. You got to be organized about it. It always blows my mind when we're in the military. We don't go to the bathroom without a 5-paragraph operations order, right? Yet when we get out and we think we want to go do something to advance veterans' issues, we resist organizing and forming a team to go and lobby our elected representatives. We could bond together, go take that hill, no problem. We get out of uniform, we lose our minds, and we fire off a few emails and don't want to work with anybody else. Okay, I'm in the home of the airborne, right? LGOP, little groups of paratroopers, right? You land, I'll blame the Air Force. We got an airman here. All right, it's y'all's fault. You scatter us all over where we're not supposed to be, miles away from the drop zone. We're with another squad, we're with another company, and so you don't go looking for your company commander, your platoon leader. You find the paratrooper next to you, get together, go find other paratroopers, and you formed a little group of paratroopers, and you go out and you accomplish the mission. You got to do the same thing when you get out of uniform. Sorry, got to make fun of the Air Force. We love y'all. You're way smarter than we are.
Yes, Matthew, I was going to tell you that I couldn't see the clock. We have a very strict countdown clock. That's for me to worry about, not for you guys. But the idea of, we have covered a lot of ground already. We're already past halfway through this panel, and we're just not going to get to everything. I came with 14 questions on these things, and my teammates said that's way too many questions. You're not going to get to them. But they're all super important. But one of the top ones that we cannot leave without talking about this is, to me, and the veterans I've spoken to, they keep mentioning the crisis line. I've talked to so many veterans who have used the crisis line, who certainly have no friends who, and we mention suicide rates of veterans a lot. It's much higher than the general population by kind of a lot. And the idea that even small cuts can make a huge difference across departments. It's hard for me to come up with a better example of the actual risk that we're talking about than making cuts to the crisis center. As Sean Wright, who's going to be in the other panel, mentioned to me, the idea that a delay of a second can be fatal. The crisis line's meant to pick up right away, and they do currently. But if there's fewer staff, maybe folks are ringing and are being put on hold. The idea that most suicides by veterans are with a gun and out of impulse, not a long drawn out plan, but out of impulse. So, can you talk to me about what this would do, what cuts the crisis center specifically would do and would mean? Would this just be inconvenience for veterans, or would these cuts be fatal? Whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'll start. It's definitely probably the most important section of the VA. Like you said, the immediate impact of someone not answering when someone's in their most vulnerable, depressed state is, you can't fail in this position. So, in the initial cuts, there were this person is just a support staff. They are people that do maintenance on the phone line or the phone systems. They're making people come in and do in the office instead of that's one thing that expanded over the Biden administration is being able to do a lot of telehealth, which was you're able to serve a lot more veterans that way. So it's a no-fail operation, and everyone who served has known someone that has reached that point in their life where they've reached their low moments. That's why we always, in the veterans, veterans helping veterans, always tell your battle buddies to reach out for you if they ever, no matter what, give me a call, give me a text, and we'll talk to each other. But that's why having that, those dedicated staff and making sure they are 100% staffed, 100% trained is critically vital. I do a lot of research, obviously, on the topic as a veterans advocate. So there's this one story I came across like a month ago that was in NBC News that was kind of like, took me back. It was this crisis center in Wyoming, in the middle of very rural Wyoming, and one of the operations manager for the crisis center was one of the Doge cuts, and so the reporter went out and interviewed a bunch of people that use the center and how Wyoming is Trump country. We went 70-30 for Trump. So all these veterans, I voted for Trump. I'm okay with making the VA more efficient and all that, but I never expected her to be fired. I come to here all the time, and I've spoken to her tons of times. She's the one that greets me at the door when I come in and I'm having a tough day. Like that person-to-person contact of getting to know this person over years. She loved her job. And then they went out and were interviewing people that, wanted to remain anonymous because they said, if I come out in my community and speak out against anything that's happening in the Trump administration, I have fear of retaliation. So it just here's veterans that serve their country that are not happy with their crisis center being cut, but they're afraid to talk about it in their community for fear of political retaliation. So that just kind of shook me back of that is not what I initially had, the country that I had signed up to defend has kind of gone down a dark path in a lot of ways that we need to correct that.
So is it hyperbole? I mean, I'm asking a question that I think I already know the answer to, but is it hyperbole then to say that if there are fewer employees at the crisis center, that that the suicide rate for veterans will go up? You're nodding your head because it is hyperbole? Oh.
No, I don't think it's hyperbole. I think it's absolutely true. And I mean, it's just the way the world works, right? If you have less resources, and every time you're trying to organize, anything, right? You tend to need a little bit more resources than your, may use every second of every day, right? So you can make yourself super efficient, but it means that people are going to fall through the gaps, there's going to be specific times, around the holidays where the calls shoot up, and if you don't have the people available, then the wait times are going to be getting longer and longer, and as you said, every second matters. And so I think it's clear that if you don't have that excess capacity, that surge capacity, that people will die.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, cuts like those amount to a deadly war on veterans, basically, that they were firing service-connected, disabled veterans working on the crisis line, which is where we want them. A lot of you worked in the space where you have helped transitioning veterans who maybe don't have skill sets that translate easily to the private sector to find employment. Roughly 30% of the federal workforce is veterans, and that's intentional, right? And where do we want service-connected disabled veterans in particular? It's on the crisis line so that when the person's in crisis, they're reaching a peer who understands, their perspective and experiences. A lot of people are more familiar with PTSD, which, has a lot of symptoms of hypervigilance, and that is more easily recognized by clinicians, but there's another side called moral injury that I mentioned before that's more like a wound to your soul or from something that you witness that sort of violates your moral compass and your essence of what is right and wrong. And that can be a compounding factor that leads veterans into crisis, and that will cause veterans to introvert into themselves, to not be comfortable sharing their experiences. And those veterans that suffer from both PTSD and moral injury can be at higher risk of suicide. And so having those veterans who have dealt with moral injury on the crisis line is essential to saving lives, because they're going to invite someone into that conversation and space in a really authentic way. And that said, when you're firing service-connected disabled veterans with skills that don't translate to the private sector, they lose their purpose, and what is another risk factor to suicide, right? Loss of purpose and faith and hope, and these are people that, never took off their uniform to serve their country, in essence. The veterans that work with us, that's the way I viewed them. They never took off their uniform. They are still saying to their brothers and sisters, I got your six, right? That's what they're doing, and you take away their purpose, you take away their financial security in their job, that's added risk to those who have been fired from the VA as well. And Unfortunately, we still lose veterans in the parking lots of VA centers who have been trying to reach care. And so this is truly a deadly war on veterans. It's not hyperbole to say that these cuts will have deadly consequences. The VA is a safety net, as Representative Ager was saying, and you never know how many veterans are going to be calling. I've worked in the emergency department. You never know how many veterans are going to need procedures. I've actually had 2 veterans who were what we call coding, who were dying at the same time. And so even though we had adequate doctors and nurses, when you cut like ancillary support staff, that's who's needed to go get medications sometimes, or to go get, scalpels and instruments in the middle of doing a procedure. So you never know when those cuts, even though it's not doctors and nurses and supposedly mission critical, actually cost lives as well.
And that was one thing I was going to ask about, the ancillary cuts. That's 2 questions away. But I want you, Emery, talk a little bit about, so I know that these issues, and like maybe in many doctors' offices, there are specialists, right? So these things are treated in a vacuum. But with a veteran, you treat everything. If you're treating high blood pressure, you're also there to catch warning signs of things or something. So tell me, as a nurse, in your day-to-day VA care, even if someone isn't coming with a crisis, how VA nurses, you told me that VA nurses know veterans. They know how to treat veterans. So tell me a little bit about how, when you're treating a veteran, you're really there to catch whatever you may be seeing that they're going through.
A nurse is trained to treat patients holistically. So we look at the whole entire person, not just that one specific thing. Not, you come in with a broken leg, and we're not just going to treat your broken leg. We're going to look at you as a whole person. What's going on at home? Some of the questions we ask when the patients come in: are you safe at home? Is anyone trying to get you to give them money or take your money or things like that? So we're looking at the entire person as a whole and treating them as a whole person. So we are going to catch that thing that they didn't come for, that other side of whatever might be hidden there. We spend a lot of time talking to veterans. It's not just I run in the room and pop you some medicine and run out. We spend a lot of time talking to them. We spend what branch of the military were you in? How are you doing at home? How is the family? How are you living? Do you have everything you need at home? Is there anything else we can get you? Make sure that everything that the veteran need is provided to them when they come in. That is the difference between us and the private sector, where you're just looking at maybe a hip replacement and we're going to mend you and send you home. We want to make sure that the veteran has everything they need and they're a whole person to us. And so I know that you have either worked for and provided this care at VAs, or needed it, or represented folks who needed it. So you've just described a kind of quality of care that I know you've mentioned to me you're already short-staffed and you're still trying to provide that. So does that mean then, is this the consequence of these cuts? If these cuts come through, and they're not all in yet, some of them are just proposed, but if these cuts go through, does that mean that standard of care will fall? It will. And one thing I did leave out, which is surprisingly, when a veteran comes in admitted to the hospital, one of the questions we ask them is like, when I come into your room and I need to wake you up, how do you want me to do that? Do you want me to knock at the door, call your name, whatever? Because different veterans might have different levels of PTSD. I've never been asked that in a private hospital. So we make sure that we cover everything for that veteran. And yes, it could mean the difference between life and death for those cuts. The proposal right now is to cut up to 83,000 jobs from the VA. No one has, Secretary Collins have not spoken to us. He has not had a conversation. National Nurses United, which is our union who I represent, We have sent him letters to have conversations about these cuts. He has ignored our letters. And unless you sit and talk to the staff and you come into the VA and you see what's going on, you can't make a decision to cut from the outside. You can't just come in and say, okay, we're going to cut housekeepers and we're going to cut supply staff, but we're not going to cut nurses and doctors. But you might as well cut nurses and doctors, because half those nurses and doctors are going to become housekeepers and supply people too, because we're going to have to be running around to fill the gap, what's missing. So they think that they're pulling the wool over the public's eye and saying, oh, we're not going to cut doctors and nurses so you can still come to the VA and be cared for. But when I'm running around looking for supplies, or I'm running around passing out meal trays because I don't have enough people to help me, then that takes away from the time I have to do my assessments. A veteran could have fallen on the floor and I not see that because I'm running around doing other things that I'm not really supposed to be doing. I would have someone to help me do. So any cuts at all is a detriment to the veteran.
And Grier and Representative Ager, can you talk a little bit about how all of these things are connected and how military families and how veterans fit into the larger problems that North Carolina is facing with rural healthcare deserts, medical debt, the threat to the expansion of Medicaid? I mean, these things also affect veterans. They also affect military families. Can you talk to me about how these two groups fit into those larger issues that North Carolina is dealing with?
Yeah, so most veterans are extremely happy with the care they get at the VA. They prefer to get their care from the VA. The VA has a few hospitals in North Carolina in larger areas, but they also have vet centers and clinics throughout the state. And not all veterans live in Fayetteville, Raleigh, or Charlotte. We're throughout the state, just like the population of North Carolina is. If these cuts go through, you're going to see the VA's presence in rural areas start to dry up. These are in areas that are already seeing their civilian hospitals close also. Now, North Carolina expanding Medicaid was a huge boost to that will help some of our civilian hospitals stay open. But if VA pulls back its presence, where are those veterans going to go get their care? You can drive from Raleigh over to Durham. Now, the traffic can be bad, but it's not that bad a drive. If you live on the coast, down where, Kyle, I think you're still down there, you're not going to drive to Durham. You're probably not going to drive to Fayetteville, to the VA hospitals there to get your care. It's just not feasible. People have lives, they have kids, they've got businesses, they've got jobs, they've got to deal with, they can't spend that time in their car, particularly for a chronic condition. So they're going to be, where are they going to get their health care from? Well, they're going to burden the already overburdened civilian facilities that are there that are also potentially drying up. And who's going to pay for that? Lower income veterans who are getting their care from the VA are potentially going to go on Medicaid, or they're going to just show up and get their care in the emergency room, and others are more competent to talk about how detrimental and expensive that is. But the point being, these cuts at the federal level are going to require tax increases potentially at the county level and potentially at the state level if the state wants to try to take care of these folks. So they're not saving the taxpayers any money in the end.
And my final question is, we're talking about a lot of heavy things and with lives being the consequence. So what, though, in the face of this gives you optimism? What gives you hope? Representative Ager, let's start with you.
What gives me optimism? I mean, I think the thing that gives me optimism is the folks sitting here at this panel and the folks who really do know how important that healthcare is. And I think there's also a general awakening in our communities, you know, both here and back home in Buncombe County for me, that we're really seeing a groundswell of support for veterans, and that is how change happens. It may not be, you know, immediate. It may not always be completely satisfying. But the fact that veterans are coming together and that the community is coming together to support veterans, I think will eventually lead to change. We just have to, as Grier said, come together and harness that energy and make good arguments about why this is so important.
Yeah, I would say I've been fortunate enough to speak at a lot of these rallies in the last few months, and yeah, definitely something's awakening in the country. Veterans from my age all the way up to people, still some World War II survivors attending these rallies, just saying like, this is not what I serve for. Like the oath we took, is for life. So the veterans want to be the ones to step forward in this moment, when our healthcare and our democracy is on the line, and be the ones to lead the charge. So I've just seen the passion and the people still love this country so much and do not want to see what the road it's going down passed down to their kids and their grandkids. So just the overall patriotism and love of country I've seen at these rallies over the last few months has really inspired me, and I have no doubt it's going to continue going forward the rest of the year and beyond.
And Emery, we have 38 seconds. So what gives you optimism in 38 seconds?
We continue to have individual conversations with veterans at the VA and encouraging them to speak up and speak out and fight. We continue to fight for our veterans. I've been in D.C. The last 2 weeks. We've been chasing, we caught Bud in the hallway. We're still chasing Tillis. So we will continue to fight. The veterans are having a march on the 6th of June, and we'll be there with them. So we continue to be hand in hand with veterans to make sure that our government do the right thing.
Thank you, panelists, so very much. And we're not done yet because we do have a Q&A if folks want to come up. We have a microphone right here, but we can also bring the microphone to you if you need be. So if anyone would like to come up and ask a question, I would love it if you would please say your name and if you're a veteran, where you're from in North Carolina, and then who you'd like to direct your question to.
Well, good evening. How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
I am a United States Army combat veteran. I talk loud, so. And my mother, my father, and my sister all served, okay? I just want to talk about a story right quick before I go into my comment. I'm a survivor of military sexual assault. During my assault, I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. My command wanted me not to do an unrestricted report, so I couldn't charge the people that assaulted me. This happened on base at work. After my assault, I got put on 20 opiates, Lunesta, Ambien, we can go down the list. 20 opiates, all 50 milligrams. I knew they wanted me to be quiet. At the time, because my mother, my father, and my sister were all active duty, just like me, I couldn't do a lawsuit. I had to go through the process to get everyone relieved that prescribed that medicine to me. I finally took the courage to go in front of the military committee in D.C. to argue the fact of my sexual assault and the fact that the Army wanted to kick me out on a mental health condition because I was assaulted, okay? I also went on Dateline NBC. My point that I'm getting at is I got out of the Army. The reason why is during my sexual assault argument, I got deployed right here to Iraq. I left Iraq, came back. My doctor said, hey, I think you need to get out because I suffered a traumatic brain injury in Iraq. Guess what? They let me stay in. 5 more years. 5 more years. I leave, go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, come back to Fort Bragg, get deployed again, suffer another traumatic brain injury. So I have one, went through concussion care right here at Walmack. I got out in September of 2014, 3 months after I got out, after getting, like you just said, the exam from the VA doctors right here at Fort Bragg. 3 months later, guess what? I had cancer. No one told me I had cancer when I got out the Army, right here. So when we're talking about Let's not cut the VA. What we need to have is oversight of the VA. And I say this because they did hire people that was not trained. They did hire people that was not medical physicians. They did hire people and gave us wrong diagnosis as well as prognosis. And I also want to talk about something that y'all didn't talk about, prevention. Prevention starts from the command. When I got out, I should have went through the full process of rehabilitation. It shouldn't have taken me to get out to go through rehabilitation. We need to talk about preventive medicine. We need to talk about how a soldier, before they leave the service, get the proper treatment from their command. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Botts. This is my husband, Nathan Botts. I'm going to introduce us, and then I'm going to let him talk for a moment. We are originally from Spokane, Washington, and transferred here for him to receive rehabilitation, actually from Atlanta, from the military share program there. And so we ended up in North Carolina for other reasons, and we're happy for the people in the community we've met here. We also are the founders of Pause for Vets, in Spokane, Washington, which my husband, a master canine trainer, and I put together. We graduated 50 veterans and dogs from our program, which was a very intensive 8-week program for each of them that went through, and gave them purpose and hope and a reason for continuing their life. And so we were very proud of that time we were able to spend with them and helping them. And we had to close that because of Nathan's medical issues that have become so detrimental to our life. So I'm going to let Nathan talk to you for a moment, please.
Hi, I'm Nathan Botts. I served 22 years in the Army, all of it pretty much in the airborne community. 116 jumps, some of them not so very good landings. With that, I served 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. During that time period, I've had roughly 13 IEDs and has basically mangled my brain and my spine. Since I've been out of the military, I've been retired for 12 years, out of the military now. During that time period, 9 of them was over in Spokane, Washington. Not one problem with getting surgeries. I'm talking about 3 lower spine surgeries, 1 neck surgery, both of my shoulders, my knee twice, and my left ankle. All of those surgeries, not one problem. We move here, it's nothing but a problem. I've had nothing but problems here. We've had over 7 different inquiries through the family advocacy to include 1 congressional just to get me care. That is wrong, right? And that's not right now, that's been in the last 2 years. So what are we doing to fix that? I live in Lumberton. It's an hour drive to come to Fayetteville, and then an hour drive just to get medication. So I know I get my medications, I have to get my medications in 2 different ways. Why? Because sometimes it's easier to just go through CVS and get them, and the other time I can get medication just to come to me. But because the VA, the disconnect between my doctor and the VA is outrageous. I went 3 months without my diabetic medications. My A1C went from a 7.5 up to 12, right? And the only reason why we got that fixed is because we went in and we saw the family advocacy, and we sat in her office for 3 hours to get every one of those fixed. And she was great. I had no problem. One of the disconnect that I saw was the individual that did all the calendar work for the care in the community was not at the hospital. We couldn't physically talk to her. She was not. And then when we had the nurse, this is quite literally a trifecta. We were talking to the family advocacy. She was talking to the nurse. The nurse said, yeah, I can just fix this. sent the information to the calendar lady for the referrals. The referral, then she goes, well, she didn't do this, so I can't do it. Why didn't she just call the nurse and say, hey, send me this information? So, yeah, 6 months, 3 hours, all right? We're talking about a year and a half, almost 2 years worth of issues, and I'm still waiting to go have another surgery on my lower back because of all this. 2 years, and that's all from right here. So what are we going to do about fixing that? That's my question.
So that is an extremely specific question, and a very profound question to the lives that they're living. So we've got 5 folks up here from across disciplines. So let's try to get a quick answer. We don't have a lot of time, but let's try and get an answer.
In the end, the VA is a big bureaucracy. In order to turn a big bureaucracy around to solve the problems it has in providing care to people like you need to innovate. And the VA has pockets of innovation throughout where they've really improved care in so many ways. I honestly don't know what the answer is, but I can tell you what the answer is not. The answer is not to cut several thousand people from the ranks of those who are trying to innovate to turn that bureaucracy around so veterans like you don't have to put up with what you've put up with. The solution is to continue to resource the VA to try to address those problems. It's a big bureaucracy. It won't come fast enough. But we've got to make sure they have the resources they need to continue to innovate, to continue to try to solve their problems.
So we are out of time, but this is what I'd like both speakers that have happened so far, please come see me afterward, okay? And I will do everything I can to get specific answers to the questions you have. Okay, we have to move on to the next panel. Thank you so much, my 5 panelists. And anyone who didn't get to ask a questions, please, we're gonna have a Q&A at the end of the thing. It doesn't have to be about that panel. You can ask whatever question you have. So we have one more video, very short video, to set up the next panel. So we are out of time, but this is...
What most concerns me is the attack on the freedom of speech and talk of people not being able to protest. Those are things that happen in countries that are dictatorships. I will not be oppressed.
We have picked that one group of people whose sole duty is to defend democracy far away from home. And we choose to disenfranchise them. That's a special kind of mean, special kind of disrespect.
I was a drill sergeant twice. I served in combat arms, tanks. I was the baddest son of a bitch in the valley.
No military person likes their integrity questioned. And it all feels like you're being accused of doing something wrong when what you've actually done is exactly what you were supposed to do.
If you would do it again, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I will support and defend the Constitution and law.
I sacrificed a marriage. I sacrificed bonding with my 2 kids. I spent all my time in the field in foreign countries fighting for this country. They're not giving me anything that I'm begging for. I deserve this. I sacrificed my mental health and my family for this.
Us as veterans will not back down. We will stand for everything that America stands for.
You have a lot of people who've been demonized by the recent political campaign that have put their lives on the line for this country, while the people demonizing them sat on the porch waving a yellow ribbon talking about support the troops.
How's everybody doing tonight? That's not on, is it? Testing. There we are. You guys hear me okay? Good. I'm more of a lectern guy than Michael is, but it's not because I'm a lecturer. No, I'm the last person to lecture. I'm a journalist. My name is Billy Ball. I don't know if any of you read the newsletter, but I write the newsletter every day for Cardinal and Pine. If so, you've probably heard me yak for a long time. We started Cardinal and Pine in 2020, I like to say about 7 days before the very first COVID case in North Carolina. So we've been waiting a long time to get in person and see the folks who read us and follow this great state of North Carolina. And I'm not going to be humble about it. I think North Carolina is the best state in America. And I love the people. I love the places. We've got our problems like anybody else, but I truly love this state. I grew up, if you don't know me, I grew up in eastern North Carolina in Elizabeth City. Every time I mention that to folks in the veteran community, they know that my dad was in the Coast Guard, and I don't have to say anything else. Or Navy? No, it wasn't the Navy. We had a lot of them too, but no, we grew up in the Coast Guard. I spent most of my childhood hanging out on a base. I learned to ride a bicycle on the base. We had vacations on bases. I met a lot of my friends on bases. We went to their houses to play on bases. We went grocery shopping on bases. There was really also, we got our hair cut from a retired guy who was in his shed in his backyard. It was $2. It wasn't that long ago. I'm 42 years old. It was a great deal. And there was like one haircut. There wasn't a lot of variety. I asked for a mohawk. It didn't go over well. I didn't get it either. But like I said, I grew up every day hearing my father making the coffee before the sun came up, ironing his pants. We used to make fun of him for ironing his pants. He would iron his whole uniform. He was the cleanest, most immaculate dude that I ever met. And he was so proud of that uniform. And he looked really good in it, too, so he knew what he was doing. And every single day, he went there with a great deal of pride in what he did. He was in the Coast Guard for 30 years. He started out enlisted after a failed career as a rock star. I don't know how he'd turn around and then join the military, but he did. And he ended up being a Master Chief, and I was extraordinarily proud of him. And really, truly grateful to have grown up in the situation that I did. I know everybody's childhood is a big part of who they are as adults. I'm grateful for what that childhood made for me. And it's contributed a lot to my reporting. I've been a journalist in North Carolina since high school. And I think that this story, these stories that we've been telling at Cardinal and Pine, not just since the election, but for some time, about the issues with care that are out there for veterans in our state. I've said to people, I've been around a lot of veterans. Coming as a military family, they were most of our friends. I don't recall a whole lot of them telling me that things were great all the time with the way the country took care of them. I don't remember anyone saying we've got too much care and there's stuff you can cut. And I think about, I'm not going to talk much longer because we got this outstanding panel and we're going to be talking, hopefully, a really strong, vibrant conversation about democracy. But I do want to say that I often think about my father, who's not here anymore, but I think about him when I write and I cover these stories because I wonder what he would think about all the things that we're seeing, that we're talking about right now. I truly don't have to wonder what he would think about cutting the VA like this. I don't have to wonder what he would think about somebody potentially saying that they weren't going to leave the White House, which is a conversation we've actually had to write about in the last few years. It's a new conversation to us as Americans and as journalists, and we're going to have all of those conversations here. One quick bit of housekeeping before I bring them out. we've got these flyers around the place. On the bottom of it, I'm happy to pass this out and hand it to you. There's a QR code for people who are not technologically gifted, like me. It means you can scan that code with your phone, and it'll take you to a sign up for our newsletter. And what we do there is we talk every day about all the news of this state. We try to condense it in a way that's easy to read, because we don't have that much time, and I don't write like a political insider. I don't know if you could tell that already. It was not my favorite part of the job, was being around political insiders, so I try to write it like the way most of us think, which is not like somebody hanging out in Raleigh and in the legislature. So I'd encourage you, if you want to learn about North Carolina news, grab one of these, and you should be able to sign up for the newsletter. I should mention it's free. I also do quick shout out to the Cardinal and Pine team, Dylan Roney, Michael McElroy, Jessica F. Simmons is over here. We've also got the Courier team with Mary Ann, with Matthew, so many people who put so much work into making this happen, and especially you have to be thanked first, because you came out on a Tuesday night when you could have been doing something else. And so give yourselves a round of applause. Really, truly appreciate each and every one of you. All right, let's have our panel come out now. I wanted to mention as well to folks, if you had questions that we weren't able to get to before, we will have Q&A after this as well, and we're gonna take some time to hopefully get some answers to that too. So don't be shy. I hope you're not. This should not be, as I mentioned before, a lecture. This is a conversation, and we want to hear from folks, and that's how we're going to treat this. So as I said, don't be shy. All right, I'm going to join y'all down there, because I don't like being up there. All right, y'all hear me okay? All right, I'll suggest to y'all as well, because we had a couple of folks on the YouTube stream say maybe eat that microphone a little bit, because it comes in a little bit quietly. I mean, we don't want to yell at you. You guys will tell us if we're yelling at you. But yeah, first off, why don't each of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you're here.
I am Sean Wright. I served as an Army medic for 14 years. And really, I think one of the main reasons I think why I'm here is in 2010, during the Afghan elections, I was deployed to Afghanistan, and our platoon, we flew in Black Hawk helicopters around during election day, so that way we could rapidly respond to any violence that happened on the ground. And I think the threats to our democracy are a much more complex problem than we were facing with the Taliban at that time.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Terry Brown. I serve in the North Carolina legislature representing Southwest Mecklenburg County. But as Billy said, your childhood really informs who you are today. And I grew up a kid here in Fayetteville. Born in Cape Fear Valley, grew up off Pamela, graduated from E. Smith High School. And you can't grow up a kid in Fayetteville without growing up around the military and understanding the issues that face veterans. And as I've been going through the General Assembly and working alongside folks across North Carolina, one of the things that I've seen is we're continually seeing attacks on our democracy and continually seeing an emphasis being placed in the wrong areas. And I want to make sure that we're really speaking to the folks that are really impacted by that. We talk a lot about what goes on in Charlotte, where I'm from, or where Raleigh, but places like Fayetteville, where I grew up at, across the mountains and out to the coast, that's where folks really are, and we really got to make sure we're supporting those issues. So glad to be here, glad all y'all veterans are here. Know there's a Woodpeckers game tonight, so glad y'all are here instead of getting a cool beer at the ballpark. Thank y'all.
All right, my name is Jay Carey. I'm a retired disabled U.S. Army combat veteran. I was forcibly removed from Chuck Edwards Town Hall back in March and woke up the next day to stories about me around the world. Big shock. So I am the founder of a C4 Resist and Persist. And my goal is to uplift the voices of veterans, their families, and VA workers, and put out there what's really happening in the VA, what's happening to the VA. Also, as the VA slowly dies, it's going to be up to those nonprofits that are going to be able to fill that void. So we're going to be starting Persist and Provide, a C3 that will provide transitional housing in a village-type setting, some of the services that that the veterans will lose, and referrals and working within the community to try to make it work for the veterans. The unhoused veteran population was the largest declining population in the United States until this year. It outstripped all other unhoused populations. My VA, they defunded the unhoused population program. We had Hurricane Helene, which destroyed the hotel that was converted for them. They were put up in hotels, and now they've taken all that funding away. If it's happening at my VA, it's happening at all VAs. So, but as far as defending democracy, I did it for a long time, and I'm happy to talk about it and answer any of your questions.
Hey everyone, my name is Kelly Artis. My tile says military spouse, and I started to feel a kind of way about that, but it's probably the easiest way to define anything about what I've been involved in and what I do. I have been married to my service member. He's still actively serving. We've been together for upwards of like 25 years at this point. He told me in college he was going to join the Army. I did not believe him, and here we are. I am local to Fayetteville, or local to North Carolina. I was actually born in Gastonia and moved to South Carolina. And oddly enough, being the center of the universe that Fayetteville and Fort Bragg is, we've spent the majority of our time in his service here. Professionally, I work in communications and marketing, but have always had a passion to work with and communicate to the military and veteran community. Authenticity is something that we value very highly. So I've been able to make inroads in different areas, particularly around quality of life issues for military families. So housing, food insecurity, military spouse employment challenges have all been near and dear to my heart and the different organizations that I've been affiliated with. And you don't often hear military spouses rattling off their political activism as part of their resume. And it was never something that I intended to be involved with. Again, being a part of the military community, being apolitical as we possibly can, is something that I've always stepped lightly around, but in recent years it has become increasingly impossible to do so. So I've been involved with Scott, who was up here earlier. He and I have done a couple of events together. Hey, I was helping with the Harris campaign. We did our best, y'all, but we were working with the Veterans and Military Families for Harris, so we helped organize. Katie and Maria from Military Families Forward are doing amazing work here at Fort Bragg as well, so I want to give them a shout out. I support them. And then also Red, White, and Blue is probably another one of my attachments.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bobby Jones. I am president of Veterans for Responsible Leadership. A little bit about my background. I am from Fayetteville, Georgia, not North Carolina. I'm a retired Navy commander. This is by far the most Army place I've ever been to in my entire life. Feel like I'm learning a new language on the fly. I'm an Annapolis graduate, class of 2001, and the reason I say that is because 109 days after I got commissioned, 9/11 happened. And my entire military career was a global war on terrorism, culminating in command of Coastal Riverine Squadron 4. So if you see clips of Vietnam in the bush with the boats, that was us. And we deployed all over the world doing some heavy-duty lifting. Thought I was going to have a nice, quiet retirement when I came home after being in charge of Morehouse's ROTC unit. And it turned out that the country that I left, the Atlanta area that I left, had dramatically changed, dramatically. I met my wife at the Naval Academy. She's a grad as well. My brother's an Air Force Academy grad. My grandfather was a Korean War vet. Her grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. So I say all that to tell you, we bleed this shit, okay? And I say it because y'all know what that's like. I'm looking in the crowd right now, and I see the cost of freedom in here. The waking up in the morning, the body aches, the flashbacks, the headaches, all of that stuff that the VA is supposed to help us do, right, to bridge that gap. And I know this panel is about national security, but my thing is you cannot have one without the other. The VA has to be sound in order for us to have a proper national security apparatus. So that being said, you know, I graduated dead last in my class, so I'm not some academic. I was a linebacker at Annapolis. So I'm telling you now, there are certain things that are very simple to average people, right? You do what you're supposed to, the way you're supposed to do it, and in the military, you do it to the best of your ability as long as you can, and then you do it some more. That's basically what has separated the American military from every other fighting force in the world. Well, right now, we have leadership that does not understand those concepts. I have been here in Fort Bragg area now for a little over 24 hours, and I keep walking past all these monuments of great men and women who were not superheroes. They did their job to the best of their ability, and then they dug and did it more. And when I turn on the TV and I watch the current commander-in-chief, and most importantly, the Secretary of Defense, man, I can't stand that guy. And I see the canyon between the integrity, the honor, the virtue, the service, not just of the service member, but the families as well. I can't sleep at night. It keeps me up. So I tell all of you guys this to let y'all know, y'all are not alone in feeling this way. The entire country, everybody that's put on the nation's cloth feels this way. And for the first time, I believe, in American history, we have leadership that doesn't get it, that thinks the Constitution is nothing more than a suggestion. Hell, even the South for the Civil War had the good sense to defect and succeed before going against the Constitution. We are in unparalleled, unprecedented times, people. And just like veterans have had to lead the way in their community, active duty members have had to lead the way in the community, unfortunately, as tired as we may be, especially this GWAT generation, the Vietnam generation, it's going to be on us to lead this country out of it.
Well said. Nobody questioned you when you said you were a linebacker, for the record. I might have been the tallest guy in the room until he walked in, and then it was over with. First off, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. This Jefferson Griffin case is over. Frankly, I've covered a lot of elections in North Carolina. I've never seen anything like that. It was new territory for a lot of people, and that included the several thousand, 5,000 veterans whose votes were a part of those challenged votes. And I know, folks who are in the military community, whether they're veterans or whether the family of the people, they feel the stake in our democracy as keenly as anyone. And when you see your vote challenged like that, we've heard from a lot of people about that. I wonder if y'all could talk a little bit about, the Jefferson Griffin case and the questions that it raised, and a lot of people say threats to veteran voting in this state.
I think I can speak to that. What I talked about, the threat of violence from the Taliban is a pretty simple, not simple problem, but is a fairly straight problem to solve. And one of the questions that was emailed out to us is, how can we protect the votes of the overseas military? I say that it's so much more pernicious because we are able to wage war against the Taliban, but in this whole Jefferson Griffin scenario, not one single elected Republican statewide, to my knowledge, stood up and talked about it. And the state Supreme Courts in red states have really just become a very, very politicized. So the problem is that they worked within the system, and they could have continued to work within the system had they finally not Jefferson Griffin finally not chosen to stand down in his challenge. And so I think in this sense, to protect military and veterans families' votes really has to come from the voters, really has to come from political pressure. We have to make it as voters unacceptable to take away the right to vote. On the Supreme Court level, the Voting Rights Act has been pretty much eviscerated by the Roberts Court. And so really it's up to the voters. I think you made a good point about veterans. It's up to voters. It's up to the grassroots to protect those rights to vote.
Yeah, I would echo that. The last panel did a really good job talking about the moral obligation that we owe to our veterans. And when you look at this Jefferson Griffin case, it's a direct example of that. When our men and women of the armed services go overseas, take their families overseas, and they're serving this country, you have an expectation that certain things are going to be taken care of. You have an expectation to be treated with a certain amount of respect and decency. And this election really showed how little the powers that be cared about that, right? So I like to think about it in terms of people that talk a good game, but they don't back it up. And we see that all the time across the political spectrum. So everybody knows when you're in school, you've got that kid who's talking all day about how they're going to get on the basketball court and they're going to do their thing, right? And then you get to gym class, and they're double dribbling, they're tripping over their feet, they're shooting air balls. They talk a good game, but they can't back it up. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. We see folks talk about how much they care about our veterans, how much they care about protecting our troops, supporting our troops, and all those things. But when it comes down to trying to make sure you can win an election, you're looking for the path of least resistance. And you're going to say, well, maybe I can challenge these overseas votes. Maybe I can challenge these military votes. But it goes directly and antithetical to the work that you're already saying when you're saying we're going to support our troops. And these are paths that are going to be happening more and more often. People are going to be looking for whatever opportunity they can, and they'll do it on the backs of anybody they can do it on. So we have to make sure that we're holding folks accountable. Folks in this room tonight, like I said, y'all could be anywhere right now, but y'all are here because you care about democracy. And we have to make sure that it's not just during an election season, it's not just when there's votes on the line, it's not just when the bad thing happens, it's all the time that we're making sure that y'all are laser focused on protecting these threats to our democracy, because we're gonna see it more and more. We're seeing that there's, as we're gonna talk about later on during this panel, there's more and more threats to democracy that are popping up. People are becoming more flagrant with their violations, and they're seeing what they can get away with. It's like a little kid. You're going to keep testing boundaries. You're going to see, okay, if I can take this overstep, if I can take this overstep, now I can take a jump. Now I can take a bigger jump. And if we don't check it, if we don't stop it now, we're going to be in a world of hurt a long time down the line. So we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can do now to say when these things go on, you're doing the wrong thing. Because like you said, nobody in elected Republican leadership stepped up to say this is the wrong thing to do. At the sake of losing an election, it doesn't cost sacrificing our dignity, sacrificing, disrespecting our veterans. That should never be the case. So we have to make sure that when these things happen, we're checking the folks that are doing it.
So this was nothing more than a test bed to see what the judicial system and the citizens would stomach. Okay, what challenges would they allow to go forward in this clear-cut win for the Democratic Party? So going forward, if and when we reach our next election period, and a big if on that, we're going to see these challenges, and they're going to get more and more ridiculous. It's going to tie up time, and it's going to be a waste of money. But like I said, it was a test bed, nothing more. They just wanted to see what they could do.
So I'll just add in the family perspective. Yes, voters or veterans were attemptedly disenfranchised, but I will tell you just from personal experience, from friends of mine who had just PCS'd here, who were on the list of challenged voters, who are also literally the least likely people to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not right, because they're just like, okay, well, okay. Right? It just kind of is what it is. We already know that voter participation among active duty families is lower than civilians. There's conflicting, reasons for that. Maybe it's personal preference around staying apolitical, or frankly, it's the barriers to be able to cast an absentee ballot. It is not easy. So one thing that I will add to, in addition to being loud about this, like we're all saying, like we have to call attention to this, is understanding the hoops that we already have to jump through in order to be able to cast a ballot. For reasons that are external to our own choices, like being stationed overseas with our service member, being deployed to active theaters. So the parameters, the restrictions that are already in place are cumbersome, but we're not complaining about that. We get through it, we do it, because that's what we're expected to do. We follow the rules, we check the boxes. When the rules are changed midway through the game or after the score has been counted, that's when we're going to start to have issues. So the question on the board even is, how do we make voting more accessible to military families? We can talk about that. I think it's a valid conversation to have, but it's not something that I'm asking for. I'm just saying stop putting the hurdles in our way. As with everything else that we encounter in our life, we give up a lot, we sacrifice a lot, and I think that incurring more sacrifices just because we're the least likely to complain about it is just grossly un-American and unfair.
I think everybody has done a good job of summarizing this. I'd just point out two things, one minor and then one overarching cultural issue that we're dealing with. Number one, in case you have not figured out, North Carolina is the petri dish for the experiment of how to swing a state. I'm from Georgia, and we thought we were the ultimate purple state. Shoot, you guys are deep royal purple up here when it comes to how y'all's votes are counted, how they're gerrymandered. I mean, if this was a comic book supervillain, I'd say they're too dastardly. I mean, the gerrymandering in this state, and I'm working on my second master's in this particular subject matter expert, it's diabolically genius what they've done in the state, right? So make no mistake, y'all are going to be looked at for the next, not just election cycle, I'm talking next 3, 4, 5 election cycles to see how all this plays out. That's number one. Number two, the overarching cultural issue that we're dealing with here is there was a time just 2 generations ago that every American had someone in their immediate family in the military. Those days are long gone. The Vietnam generation was the beginning of that break apart. The draft ended. People who actually went, a lot of them didn't want to go, et cetera, et cetera. Now you have a friend that serves, another family friend that's in. It's not your kid, it's not you who've done it. And so what happens is there's a separation of importance of taking care of the military family. Do you honestly think in World War II that the ballots from people overseas were not counted? They were the first counted because everybody had skin in the game. I'm Generation X. I'm the last real generation that knew the World War II generation. They were our grandparents. Really got to hear the stories of fascism, these type of things, and how it overtook the rest of the world. Now, it's like a boogeyman fairy tale to the current generation of millennials because they can't go and talk to those people. It's sort of like how the Holocaust has been more in the rearview mirror as that generation dies off, and now you see the rise of anti-Semitism. It's a direct correlation because the people that live the experience are no longer here to give you first accounts of it. So when you translate that into voting, when you translate that into policy, now it's the cool, fashionable thing to sit there and say, we support the military. But there are a lot of people from a lot of red districts that ain't doing a damn thing to support us, period. They want you to go so their kid doesn't have to go. They want you to be there so they can talk tough. But when the bill comes due, they don't want to pay it. And so what's happening is you have veterans of the longest conflict in American history. Let me say that one more time. The longest conflict in American history coming home, and the things that should have been promised, the things that weren't promised, the things previous generations got are missing. And then they guilt shame you in complaining. I retired in October of 23. Went through the whole disability process with the VA, and I was an inconvenience to the hospital in Atlanta. I'm telling you that right now. I was an inconvenience. Never mind all the birthdays and stuff that I missed that my wife went. My wife and I both deployed at the same time. My 8-month-old daughter had to stay with my parents for 8 months, hoping one of the parents would come back, right? So understand, we're dealing with a cultural issue that the politicians who are sitting there saying, I support the military, most of which have never served, they use buzzwords. They use this as backdrop to look tough. As opposed to, I don't know, when Richard Nixon was in office and you had a Congress where everybody had served, you had the leader of the Senate majority walk down the hill to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and tell him, we're going to impeach you tomorrow unless you resign. Same party. Because they had fought fascism. So when we're looking at what's happening here, it's a cultural divide between military and the civilian world, but understand this. Unfortunately, the military population has to be more vocal in bridging that gap because our civilian brothers and sisters honestly have no idea what we do. They honestly have no idea what it costs, and most importantly, they don't understand what we have protected. So we have to re-educate.
It's a great point. All of you are making outstanding points. Along the lines of what you're saying about being more vocal. I wanted to ask about this anyway. You know, I've heard veterans and folks who come from military communities who kind of want to stay away from politics. I've heard that for years. That I don't want to. I follow orders. I do not. Whoever's in charge, the commander in chief, that's who I take orders from, and I stay away from the political side of it. I'm seeing more and more folks who come from one branch of the armed service or another who feel like it's imperative for them to speak, especially right now. Can y'all talk a little bit about that? How do is that culture changing?
Well, I'll tell you, staying non-political is it's a gift. It's not something we don't have that luxury. It's a luxury, really. It's a luxury to stay non-political. Okay, we don't have that luxury anymore. 90,000 U.S. Army members are about to be RIFed. Okay, in order to make the Army more streamlined. Said by a guy who does not understand how the Army works. I was a tanker. All right, we're not a streamlined unit. We leave that to the Marines. All right, we are looking at the need to stand up and be political because that choice will be made for you if you don't do it. My son will not enter into the U.S. Air Force until either this political situation. Well, he's not going in until Trump's out of office, is what is happening, okay? And he's a senior in high school, all right? Because I'm not going to have him take up arms against his fellow Americans because we are 68 days from martial law being declared. If you didn't know that, you need to understand that. At day 100, a study by Homeland Security and the Department of Defense was turned in to the president whether they were recommending martial law or not to be enacted within 90 days. What do you think they recommended? Whatever Trump said they recommended. We are 68 days. There will be troops in the streets. There will be martial law. They're using this talk about habeas corpus as a distraction. That's just one part of it. They want you to look over here while they're doing everything else. We are in an oligarchy. We are in a fascist state. The Constitution has been completely disregarded. The Supreme Court has been completely disregarded. And it's going to be up to veterans to form those groups in order to keep our people safe.
Can I jump in on, because I was hoping we'd get to this at the end, but my God, you brought it full front. So let's talk. The most scary thing that happened in the first 100 days to me, as someone who not only was in command, but command of a task group in the Middle East during the Afghanistan evacuation, was the removal of the judge advocate generals of the Army, Navy, and Air Force immediately. Now, for those who don't know, those are the lawyers. The top lawyer in each branch, and the Marines fall under the Navy, were removed. Commanding officers, first of all, those who don't know, officers and enlisted take two different oaths. So I was an officer. The enlisted, y'all take the oath to support and defend the Constitution and to obey the orders of the president and the officers appointed above you. As an officer, I never took such an oath. My oath says to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, that I take this obligation freely without purpose of mental evasion, blah, blah. The line about the president is removed under officer commissions. You know why? We're the last sanity check against a tyrannical commander-in-chief, okay? Now, if you would have told me back in 2001 when I'm picking up President Bush and getting in trouble with the Secret Service that one day those enemies you're talking about fighting, the fight of your life is going to be domestic, I would have laughed my ass off at you. But here we are. And so what he is talking about is the judge advocate generals were removed so they can be replaced by basically loyalist lawyers. Pete Hegseth's personal lawyer, my former shipmate on USS Normandy, Tim Palatore, who has defended a lot of war criminals, was reactivated and is now in the Pentagon. They are searching for the right lawyers to do exactly what he is saying in 68 days. Because what officers are going to say is, I know what the Constitution says, we're not supposed to turn our weapons against American citizens. That's why you have a National Guard for, and they have to go through precautions for that, and that's why you have local law enforcement. President Trump has already laid the paperwork down for that to happen. And you're going to have to rely on commanding officers, I'm talking 04 field grades, 05s in the Navy, this type of stuff, to sit there and say, no. It's going to come down to individual officers that are in command. Never before in American history have we had this happen, where you go in and you gut the legal protections first. Then all of a sudden, you have everybody lining up at the border. Y'all have noticed that too, right? Okay? The military parade is supposed to be happening. It's all a playbook that we saw in the 30s in Germany, the 20s in Italy. We've seen this before, but it's been accelerated at a pace that the world has never seen before, and it's happening in the United States of America. We are not being hyperbolic when we're saying this. Turn on the TV, ask your congressman, and here's the thing that's amazing about the Congress people know it too. I saw Senator Murkowski sit there and say, we're scared. You're a U.S. senator. The job description, one of the 18 you have, is oversight of the commander-in-chief. If you don't want to do the job, move the hell out the way, resign, and let someone else move there. But I'm telling y'all now, Fort Bragg, right here, with the prestige of the 82nd Airborne and everything y'all have here, this is going to be ground zero for that. That's why I brought my butt up from Atlanta. It's ground zero here. Here, Fort Kemp, y'all are it. We can't drag ships down the street, unfortunately. But you guys, that's what y'all do. That's what y'all do. And I cannot stress the panic level enough on this. The line, all the dominoes are falling, people. Those of us who are paying attention, it's blatantly obvious. And anytime you hear a voice of dissent, they try to shut it down. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, so I did little over 20 years in the Army, retired as a sergeant first class. Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, been there, done that, I'm that unicorn, all right? All the time, as a young soldier and as a senior leader, we talked with each other about what would we do if we're given an illegal order, an unlawful order. What would we do? If everybody won't band together and do the right thing, then it will fail whatever that 1 or 2 or 3 people are trying to do. You have to stick together. Veterans have to stick together. There's a lot of veterans I'm seeing that are starting to wake up that voted for Trump, and they're realizing what's happening. Right? There's still a lot that aren't, but there's a lot that are. And there's a lot of active duty people out there that are talking about this amongst themselves, and they have been talking about it. And I have faith in our senior leadership. I have faith in those senior field grade officers, not all of them, but quite a few of them, that they'll do the right thing. That they'll either turn their backs or they'll turn their guns, whatever they have to do to save our democracy, or to save this country. We're past trying to save our democracy right now. We're going to be reinstating our democracy. To save our country and to save the people of this country. Because I don't know if you saw that movie, Civil War. It was interesting. It kind of got a couple things right. Most things, I can't watch military movies anymore because, anyways, Hellfires don't fire 200 feet and then detonate. Anyways, they made that's what's going to happen. It's going to be anarchy. This is too big of a country to control. There's going to be anarchy. But it's going to be up to us, veterans, and up to those civilians that are willing to join to stand up against that anarchy and that fascist regime in Washington and put this country and remake this country as it should be.
Let me ask here. We've got, we're very fortunate to have a state lawmaker here. Thank you again for coming. And we've got Kelly. I know you as a member of a family that goes wherever the military sends you. You're committed now, by the way, with your husband, who you didn't know it was going to be 25 years.
Yeah, I'll keep going.
What do people like us do who are not in the military to what can we do to protect our democracy?
Okay, so first of all, for anyone watching who's not familiar, let's make the distinction clear. I myself am sitting here as a civilian. Obviously, I've never served, I'm not a veteran. And our service members do stay apolitical on purpose. That's by design. I will mention, though, that using our voices as part of the community is not only a privilege, but one to be taken just with a lot of responsibilities. That's something that I pay a lot of close attention to, and is what a lot of people, particularly in the military spouse lane, are really conscious of for reasons of not trying to pull their service member into the conversation in a way that isn't appropriate. The military is still the second most trusted institution that we have in this country, and we have to hang on to that. So what I have found helpful and gives me purpose and feels like it's making an impact is staying focused on the issues that we can, raising my voice because of the inherent authority that we carry with us as people who are actively impacted by the lifestyle. You have a lot to say. You don't have to come out bearing any sort of political, mandate in order to do that. I can say to someone, if you think that our elections are not ran well, I encourage you to volunteer as a poll observer or a poll worker in order to understand not only how well run it is, but then also here's my experience having to vote absentee from somewhere else, right? So there are things that, to your point, about America not really understanding us. We're a bit of a, we're a mystery. There is this military community thing that exists and most people don't have a touch point. So being able to elucidate on what our lifestyle actually is, what it entails, what we give up, and what we proudly do sacrifice in order to support our service members in this country is, I think, really meaningful in and of its own way and can be its own form of political activism. The other thing I'll say is, y'all don't know this, but we're really good at organizing. So you give a military spouse a challenge, yeah, you are gonna find the quiet work being done in the background. So my way of being involved and sort of getting my hands dirty in a quiet way is organizing folks, joining other organizations who are doing the hard work of organizing, pinpointing policies that can be reversed, bettered, voted against, right? Just, letting your neighbors understand how certain policies or legislation may impact you and your family. And everyone, frankly, does still appreciate and want to support the military. So putting a face on it, putting a story on it, a narrative around it, yeah, it's all well and good to say that, you think the VA should be cut because waste, whatever. But when you actually put the stories behind it, it's really hard for someone to find something that they disagree with around that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I have been much more political of recent years than I think I have ever been, but I have found a lot of power in that and a lot of respect for the voice that we represent in order to be able to, let the American people know, not only do we not agree with what's going on, but we're really frightened by it.
So I'll say that one of the first things I learned when I got elected was how much I didn't know. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm here today, is because it really is important to come and talk to folks that you are representing, that you're serving, to understand their lived experiences. One of the most frustrating things that I see in Raleigh amongst lawmakers is people are trying to make policy decisions without actually talking to the people that the policies are going to affect. You can have all the best ideas in the world, but if you don't actually talk to folks that this policy is going to affect, you're doing yourself a disservice, you're wasting everybody's time, you're wasting taxpayer dollars. One of the things I hear all the time, and I'm lucky to serve with veterans in the General Assembly, like Representative Ager that's here, but one of the things I hear when I talk to folks back home and throughout the state of North Carolina when I get to travel around is, we saw you pass XYZ bill. Why'd you do that? And in the back of our minds, we're thinking, well, the bill sponsor said he was doing it to support military veterans. And veterans would come and tell me, this has nothing to do with us. This won't help us at all. But that comes from not talking to the people that you're engaged with, not talking to people that you're supposed to be representing. So one of the things that's really important for us is to be able to come out talk to y'all, hear y'all's lived experiences, not talk at y'all. That's why I'm hanging back tonight, because I think it's important to hear and listen to those experiences, because when we're crafting policies, the policies have to be laser focused on who we're representing and actually making change. I don't go back and forth to Raleigh, leaving my family and all those things just to go out and have fun, put on a suit and tie and craft some bills I think are going to do something. I really want to make an impact and try to make folks' lives better. But the only way you can do that is you talk to folks and really understand their lived-in experiences. If I really want to support veterans, the best idea is not my idea to support veterans. It's y'all's idea on how we can support veterans in the state of North Carolina. It goes for every single group that we're talking to, but so often we don't make the effort to go out and talk to y'all. And I say we don't make the effort to go out and talk to y'all because we have plenty of groups that come to Raleigh that lobby us, advocate different issues and things like that. The last panel talked about the difference in money and those things and people who have the ability to lobby more. I don't think it should be that way. I think it should be us going to y'all. It should be us talking to y'all, us having a dialogue with the folks that we're representing to really make the best impact, to really get the best policies put forward. And I think that we'll see a real change in how things are affected. Because going back to that original question, a lot of folks say they don't deal with politics. But politics deals with every single person in this room and every single person in our country. So if you're not actively engaged in the political process, you're not actively getting out there and using your voice, making a difference, doing some real things, you're going to get run over by the political machine. Because I'll tell you, I sit in committee rooms, I sit in the House floor, and I've seen committee rooms grind to a halt because people have gotten emails from their constituents. They're getting phone calls nonstop from their constituents. But if you're not making those phone calls, if you're not telling folks what you think, people are going to be able to say, well, I didn't know this was a problem. I had no idea this was a thing. This didn't bother me. I didn't know this bothered you at all. How was I supposed to know that? They know. They just don't want to say they know. But when you hold them accountable, you hold their feet to the fire, they won't be able to have that excuse anymore. They may still do it, but now we have that record of saying, you're a liar. And when you're a liar, and we're going to get you out of there.
I think you don't mess with politics, and I think people find that politics tends to mess with you when you try to stay outside of it. I've got one more question. We've got about 5 minutes, and I'm going to steal it from Michael's panel, and I would love to hear from each of you. A lot of people are feeling afraid, angry, sad, desperate. I've seen that too. Or some people are not that worried, but it's not most of the people I talk to. You know, what is it that gives you optimism about our democracy, our fragile but still here democracy?
What really gives me hope about our democracy is you are starting to see the problem with conservative policies from Republicans is they're so bad that if you were to explain them to people, like I worked for the Harris campaign and we tried all day long to talk to people about Project 2025 and it just did not obviously land. And so you're starting to see just how purely evil these people are, how, you know, really I study health policy and really the only reason they're making these Medicaid cuts, they're making some of these cuts, are to support tax breaks for the richest 10% of the 1%. So that, you know, seeing people engage really makes me very optimistic. And then one thing that makes me pessimistic is obviously we all took an oath. Well, there's a whole organization called the Oath Keepers that is based on that oath and is interpreting that obligation to defend the Constitution in a very different way. So I think one thing I love about seeing veterans stand up is we need to see, you know, more veterans speaking out on social media, combating disinformation, talking about their experience, because there's a problem in the veteran community that when no one who is a liberal or like me, a bisexual veteran wants to go hanging out at the VFW. Because it's going to be just like a bunch of conservative people who don't understand, they're mean, they're rude. And so I think it's really time for left-leaning veterans to speak up, use your influence, go on social media if that's your thing. And so I think we have a great opportunity for hope with more veterans realizing they need to use their voice.
I think that's a great point. The more people that are speaking out, and I think that it's a two sides of the same coin, right? We're hearing so many bad things. We're seeing so many negative things that are getting out there, but it really is activating people at a time where things are getting so wild, things are getting so outlandish coming from the federal government and from all across the country that people are now finally saying something isn't right. Even the most apolitical people are finally waking up and they're realizing how much things are affecting them. It's affecting their bottom line, it's affecting their wallets, it's affecting their kids' school, it's affecting everything you do. And when you wake up in the morning and you start seeing that your day isn't going as smooth as your day used to go, you start to question what happened, what changed. And people are starting to connect those dots to realize all of these things that people were talking about that I just brushed off, that I just said wasn't a real thing, I said it's not going to happen, those things are starting to happen. I'm starting to see those things, and it's making folks get more activated, more energized, and go out and do more things. So I don't think that we are too far gone at this point. I think that we still have a lot of room to grow and change and turn this ship around, but we have to do it now. We have to make sure that we're taking active steps, and it's not just making phone calls, it's not just writing letters, it's really being strategic, really being smart, and really getting engaged in your community. I always tell folks, there are 1,000 different ways, no matter what city you live in, whether it's a small town or a major metropolitan area, there are 1,000 different ways to get involved and directly shape your state. I look at us on the state legislature level, we represent about 90,000 people. A lot of our races are decided by less than 1,000 votes, less than 500 votes. You all can make a huge difference in swinging these elections. We talked about North Carolina being a purple state. We can make a real difference in how we are shaping the state, how we're shaping policy in North Carolina, but we have to make sure that everybody is along for the ride. We have to make sure we're committed to bringing you all along for the ride and making sure that everybody understands the implications, because right now we're at a tipping point and we have to do something or else we're going to tip the wrong way.
All right, so what gives me hope? My hope's probably focused a little bit differently than other people's. People are starting to fight back. People are waking up, understanding that what's happening is not right. I see a growth in mutual aid, whether that be giving somebody a ride to somewhere or setting up warehouses throughout our country for people to go to if they have to leave where they're at. People are understanding that creating a safe haven within their own home for those undocumented migrants who are being kidnapped by a agency that is not even, that is made up of oath takers and Proud Boys. They're not the police. They're not actual agents. People are physically pushing back on them, understanding that if they don't risk their life now, it will risk so many more people's later. And they're being willing to do that. That gives me hope for this country to fight back against this fascist regime, reestablish ourselves as what we're supposed to be. But it's going to be difficult. But I have hope that people are going to be able and willing to stand up, because they're starting to do it now.
I think that injustice has a funny way of motivating people, particularly those of us who are so hyper concerned and passionate about the cost of freedom and what it takes to maintain and protect and defend those freedoms. So particularly for our community, there has been I don't even want to say awakened, like there has been more of just a battle cry to protect these freedoms that we send our family members off to defend, that we've lost loved ones for. So what gives me hope has been the turnout. Again, it's quiet work, but there is a turnout undercurrent of organizing, particularly when we're noticing freedoms being infringed upon. So we've been involved in voter suppression work. We are doing some work around the book bans that are happening in the DoD right now. That's something that we should be paying attention to. And what gives me hope are the babies in Germany at the Dodea school that walked out in their class because they even knew that it was uncool to restrict books, particularly in Germany. I digress. So what gives me hope, I think that we, above most, understand the importance of what we're fighting for, and now given a very concentrated direction, can carry that fight forward.
That's a complicated question you asked. To be honest, what gives me hope is our past and our present. And what I mean by that, I'm amazed at American history when you really look at it. And the Navy has this, our slogan is honor, courage, commitment. I think it's the greatest thing ever because it's very simple. And I tell people courage is what really has defined the United States Navy since 1775, right? Courage is not being the superhero and you run into the burning part of the ship or this, that, and the other. No, it's having enough damn sense to know I could die, but I do my job anyway. That's courage, right? And from the first person to die for this thing called America, called Crispus Attucks, a black sailor at the Boston Massacre, to the 20-year-old dive bomber at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, going into the cannons of the largest battleship ever made in the Yamato, to the little black girls in Alabama in their Sunday best going in front of Bull Connor's Bulldogs, ages 10, 9, 11 years old. This country has had a steady stream of courageous people step up in its darkest moments. That's what makes us American. It's not right or wrong, it's having the testicular or ovarian fortitude to step up and say, I'm not having this anymore. That's what America really is about. It's not about one person, it's about a collection of people who say, I cannot afford to allow my neighbor or my children or my grandchildren to live under these conditions. So every day when I wake up in the morning, as hokey as it is, I look for something that gives me just that push to make it through the day. Today, for example, I knew I was coming here. I have on a t-shirt that has the Double V campaign. And for those who don't know what the Double V campaign was, in World War II, African Americans had to ask themselves a question. Why should we go abroad and fight fascist Germany and Imperial Japan when we're dealing with Jim Crow right here? Why the hell should we go sacrifice? We did that in World War I. Why should we do it again? And there was a black newspaper called the Pittsburgh Courier that said, we helped build this country, we're going to defend it, and when we get done, we're going to fix this country. Victory at home, victory abroad, Double V. It's been a long time since people have seen that symbol. I put it on everything I own because right now, I believe we are in the second iteration of that campaign. It's no longer just about African Americans, so it's about average Americans being able to live their lives in a society that has the same rights that their parents enjoy. Because right now, my daughters, 21 and 17, have less rights than their grandmother did. And that is the most un-American thing I have ever heard of or seen in my entire life. So my hope is the courage that generation after generation after generation, 26 generations of Americans have displayed since 1609 will continue to step up. Because if not, this 250-year experiment will be over. And I cannot comprehend that. So I have hope because I got no choice. I got no choice. 21, 22 years of my life being on ships all over the place, and you Army guys don't know what that's like, but seeing the same people every day for 8 months, 9 months at a time, that's a sacrifice. It had to be for something. It had to be for something. So that's what gives me hope.
We've got time, I think, for a few questions here. They'll kick us out of the building at 9. It'll be a polite kick out, but yes, sir.
So first off, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, first off, Jay, when you first saw me back there, I had no idea exactly who you were until you said so. So I want to say thank you for standing up and refusing to take a step back. They had to drag you out of there because you wasn't going to put up with their bullshit. Now, something you spoke about. You know, when you have cuts to the VA, that's our care in the community. That's our dental appointments, things like that. And you talked about politics. You know, we have a man right now that represents this area that calls himself the veterans representative. But he has sat silent while Elon Musk gutted the VA with over 7,000 jobs, and they're eyeing another 80,000. If we allow this to continue to go, Make no mistake about it, it's going to get even harder for us. They're going to shut down those clinics, and then we're going to have to all drive to the VA hospitals because the clinics aren't working anymore. And I'll say this, and I didn't want to say this here because this isn't my event, but I threw my hat in the ring. I'm running for Congress against the very jackaloon that daggone told everybody no more town halls. Now, I'm a veteran, and I'm going to tell you, just like you, everybody up here, nobody will fight for veterans more than veterans will. And that's why we've got to reach out, and we've got to get people in these fights all across the country, up and down the ballot in every single election. Let's put veterans in offices, because make no mistake about it, if anybody can fix this country, it's us. Thank you.
Totally agree.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't have my blue cast anymore. Nobody ever recognizes me. It's okay. I like that kind of fame, let me tell you.
Hi, y'all. My name is Elisa Buchanan. My husband is a veteran. I wrote it up. I'm reading. I'm simplifying. From my understanding, there was a surge in enlistment after 9/11, largely driven by a sense of patriotism. The next wave or generation of soldiers were driven by patriotism, yes, but also financial stability and health care. It made the military an attractive career, but now young adults don't feel that sense of patriotism. That's what I'm sensing. And instead it's replaced by nihilism and hopelessness, and they're putting their head in the sand, which I don't blame them for. They're young and coming up and looking around at what's happening. With healthcare no longer promised, everything happening in America, why would a young American want to sign up? How would the military market itself as an attractive career option? And what type of people will be attracted to that message that the military is sending out? And what type of people will the military be comprised of in the future?
Wow. So I'm not going to lie to you. That question has popped up a lot. And I can tell you, I was at the Naval Academy, talk about book bans. I was at the Naval Academy, I'm trustee up there a month ago. Had a very, I can't believe this. I had a one-way conversation with a 3-star admiral. Like, what are we doing when Hitler's Mein Kampf is in the library, but Maya Angelou is not? And I went to Nimitz Library. I was like, you got to be kidding. All of that sucks on the surface. But I would tell people, you do not join the United States military because of an administration. If you look at our history, ups and downs, policy changes, you believe in the fundamental core of what the country's supposed to be. Now, the reason all of us are here, even having this conversation, is for the first time in American history, I believe the core of the country is being rattled. The first Trump administration was like, I'm going to shake the foundations. Now it's about exploiting the cracks. If you notice, his first administration, you had all these, actual professionals in their fields, Mattis, this, that, and the other. Now it's just loyalists, people who have no business in the cabinet seats, etc. So if I'm a 17-year-old, it's like, why the heck would I do that? They're erasing black history, women's history, blah, blah, blah. This, why would I? Because that's what they want you to do. They don't want the DEI, quote unquote, in the military. But here's the newsflash. The United States military is America's first DEI organization. Hate to break it to you. It wasn't because they wanted it. It wasn't because they wanted it. They had no choice in the revolution. When George Washington was praying at Valley Forge, you know what God sent him? A gay man from Germany. Am I right or wrong? And von Steuben came up with the blue book that we still use today, a gay man. I don't know if Hexef knows that.
No, he doesn't.
But it's the truth, right? Everybody here, we're Americans too. So we have to defend our country collectively. It's not about, oh, well, these guys don't want me there. Good, I'm petty. I'm going right over there because they don't want me over there. Now, not everybody's wired that way, but I'm telling you, as far as development of becoming a responsible young man or young woman, as far as pushing yourselves beyond your self-perceived limitations, finding another family that you realize has nothing to do with blood, that's why I would join the American military. That's why I did, right? But at the same time, when you get in these environments, you'll quickly figure out what the bullshit is. You'll be like, these people have no idea what they're talking about. This dude, man, he's cool. My roommate from Annapolis was from Sonoma, California, wine country, and I'm from the south side of Atlanta. How do you think that went? But that's my brother from another mother now.
And all of us in the military have that story. So don't let the static of this temporary flare dissuade your desire to serve. And let us adults who are here fight to make that sacrifice worthwhile. That's why we're here. Give us time to work on it.
I would love to jump in on this too. Hey, Alyssa, good to see you. There were conversations happening at super high levels around the concept of, instead of it being necessarily singularly considered an all-volunteer force, considering the entire family as a unit, so it's an all-volunteer family. And we were starting to make some progress in that arena when it comes to relooking the personnel model of the United States military. We're not camp followers anymore that, do all of the volunteer unpaid labor. The base is going to actually need to subsidize some of that labor to account for the family programs, et cetera, et cetera. Also, interestingly, the military spouse survey that the DoD does every 2 years just came out yesterday, and we are still continuing to see a trend downward of military spouse satisfaction with the lifestyle, which also, you guys, will have an 8 times impact on whether or not the service member stays in or gets out. So if we're not paying attention to the entire family, we're missing the mark when it comes to retention particularly. But our kids, our legacy military members, usually that's where most of the force comes from, our legacy families, are growing up in this environment. My daughter is now seeing these efforts of DEI happening to dismantle and disappear, essentially, all of the records of service members of color and women who have succeeded. And she's saying, what? Why would I join an organization that doesn't value me as a person? So I think there are still those conversations that need to continue happening. We need to continue making noise about them and revisit them when we can, but not to fall asleep on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, right now this is an unprecedented situation. All right, I am not going to allow. I mean, I did what I wanted when I was 18, which was join the Army and made my Navy SEAL father like damn near cry because he's like, "What are you doing?" But I'm not the only one saying this. Right now, ways of getting people into the military, how do we recruit them and things like that, that needs to be suspended from your thoughts. And understand that with this current regime that's in place, which won't last forever. That's the beauty of what we learned in the military. I don't like my commander. He'll be gone in a year and a half, all right, as a soldier. Just don't do anything stupid to get yourself in trouble. Wait it out. He'll be gone. You'll still be here. Once things can come back to normal, we've got to look at, I heard somebody joking today about our youth today, how are they going to fight the wars of tomorrow when they can't get off the couch and go walk a block to their friend's house, so they'd rather sit on the computer. I'm 54. I was saying that when I was in I was like, these young punks coming up. My lieutenant, I'm 40, the oldest person in the company. My lieutenant's 21, and I'm like, oh, look at this. The truth is that the American fighting person rises to the occasion, always has, always will. How do we get them into the military? Well, financial stability, because that's going away for a lot of people. I joined for college. I went 1 semester. I got a lot of money that I'll never use. But have faith in the youth of today that they will step up and they will do what needs to be done. They will join the military for whatever reason it is for theirs. Some of them, my son wanted to join the Air Force so he could go be a cybersecurity. And I explained to him, AI will remove all of that, so don't worry about it. Go be an electrician. But if anybody had that answer to how to get people into the military today, man, there's people that pay you a lot of money for that answer. Because we've been asking that question for decades. I came in 1989. All right, so there's no good answer. It's going to be I joined the Army because I was working as a security guard at a dress factory and I had no life. I drove by a recruiting office, stopped in, and they suckered me in, and I was a tanker for 20 years. Oof. But it's a good question. It's just the answer is kind of 1,000. I mean, it's hard.
It's a hard question. It's always been a hard question, though.
Always.
It's not just now. That has always been the case. Think about it. Less than 1% of America defends the other 99%.
And yeah.
There's your math.
And just think about how many people that actually make it to retirement out of that 1%. Very, very little.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great question. You should have moderated this panel. I'm going to answer my own question from a few minutes ago about what gives me optimism. It's seeing people like y'all. It's seeing people like y'all and the people who are watching this on YouTube or Facebook or wherever who are speaking. And whether you agreed with a word that anybody said up here tonight or not, you're here and speaking to us. And that gives me a great deal of pride. It makes me feel good. And it gives me a sense of optimism. So give these folks a hand and give yourselves a hand, please. And we're gonna stick around for a little while. We've got food and drinks. If you haven't already, the name of the news publication is Cardinal and Pine. We made it really clear right there. We're brand new, but we're growing really quickly. We'd love to have you read us. We are undeterred, unafraid, and we've got a team of journalists who are working really hard every day. Sign up for the newsletter. It's 100% free. There's never a paywall. Hopefully we'll break down the news, and we talk about fun stuff too, so it's not just all drama. So thank you again for coming out tonight. I hope you drive safely. I hope you stick around and talk for a little while. Thanks.